just decided to make these videos as topics come to mind. I'll be addressing astrophysicists in this particular one on the origins of the universe. The theory has changed recently from the Big Bang theory to more like, the existence of the universe is just an expanding loaf of like raisin bread, for lack of a better description, from these recent, discoveries. But God showed me how He created the visible universe, and this at least explains. So, for those that mock and think there's no God and think they've got it all figured out, are agnostics or atheists and stuff, I challenge you to listen, because if you consider yourself intellectually superior, you should be able to debate, others that come with knowledge that you might not be agreeable to. And that is the knowledge that not only can God be scientifically proven to exist, but the existence of who that creator is scientifically provable as well. And His divine recordings and divine footprints and divine fingerprints throughout His creation are also scientifically provable. So I hope that the brainwashing in our public education system will cease, because this nation, for the most part, had its public education through the Christian church, and frankly, the nation would have been far better off to this date had it remained that way. But to the astrophysicists, the reason why you've gone from the Big Bang theory of late to this expansion theory is because you're simply pointing your optical devices in, a few general locations. You've got to realize that what God showed me is the truth, and you'll discover it is the truth over time if you follow, just the scientific method that you're on. But this is how God made the visible universe. It wasn't some tiny, infinitesimally small particle. The invisible, eternal creator that's always existed and always will exist brought forth material matter, visible matter, in the form of a giant molten ball. There's not a word in any language to describe the enormity of it, because it's the entire visible matter of the entire universe all in one molten ball at once in one location. And the invisible creator of the universe can make His hands any size, small enough, to work on microscopic things that we can only see through the discovery of optics, that the scriptures have spoken of, for millenniums, but optics only proved, recently. So the scientific fact is that if you take your optical devices and look in one direction, you'll see a constant expansion this way, and if you look in another direction, you'll see even a wider expansion, and if you look in another direction, you'll see expansion, but it's closer together and denser. And the reason for this is because what I'm saying is in fact true, that the universe all started as one enormous molten burning matter of gases, liquids, and solids, all superheated so that they were in fact liquids. And the Almighty took his hands and took the enormous, matter He had created of burning mass, which looked like to me like just a giant, bit of lava in zero gravity, all compiled and condensed and burning brightly like, the many, innumerable multitude of myriads of stars all compiled together that it was. And in that intense moment, He took it and He spun this sphere in zero gravity. And when He did so, these molten matters, which turned out to be galaxies upon galaxies and within our universe, went spitting off this giant molten mass, and globules would elongate first as looking like something like a long john donut or something, and then sometimes it would come together just like liquid does in zero gravity, and they've recorded, for, posterity in the space station, that these liquid globulates will just spread out, and some of them will coalesce, and some of them will break apart. But since it was superheated, as they would spin off, they would be spinning, and parts would explode and collide with other parts that had spun off the molten matter. So what you'll find in the universe is that generally galaxies are revolving around the origin and expanding from the origin via centripetal force and zero gravity. And that's the reason why solar systems are spinning, galaxies are spinning, planets are spinning. That's the reason why everything is spinning. And a Big Bang Theory doesn't explain while the vast majority of the universe is revolving in orbits. And what I'm saying explains exactly, because that's exactly the way our universe was created. It's the reality in which we exist. That the things that are stationary or appearing semi-stationary were in fact just bits of the matter that broke off from the origin that collided, and when they collided, they would sometimes spin in this way and sometimes spin in that way, but generally are all spinning in the same direction, all of it. Generally, the masses are all revolving, all orbiting, all spinning in the same direction, because God put that molten mass in motion himself. And that's really the universe in which we exist. Now, scientists will discover, that the expansion at the outer reaches will have matter that's further apart. Most of the galaxies have denser, bits of mass, hotter at its center and cooler at its edges, and the same thing with the entire universe. It's cooler at the edges, hotter in the center. So when you're looking at stars and galaxies and towards the center, you're seeing, more and more condensed and hotter galaxies, and when you look further out, you're seeing cooler and more sparse galaxies. Now, most all the galaxies are dense in the center, but some of them had, matter that either exploded from within the center, so you've got like an opening with, a bunch of particulates lightly around it. The reason why everything's virtually spherical, there's some odd-shaped bits and pieces, again, through the explosions of the superheated material, but gases, liquids, and solids, when it's superheated in zero gravity, eventually tend to coalesce and form a spherical shape. If it wasn't zero gravity, or in the universe was an absolute void when it all began, then that wouldn't be the case. We'd have a bunch of, misshapen or odd-shaped things that are not generally spherical in nature. But because what I'm telling you is the truth, that at one time everything was superheated, and all solids were so hot they were liquids, and that's why we have some solid planetoids and asteroids and other celestial bodies that are solids that are also spherical in shape. And if you think about a big bang of something that just explodes, you'd have all kinds of pieces that are odd shaped and stuff, but generally everything in space is spherical shape, because what I'm telling you is the truth, that when God created the universe, everything was superheated, and all solids were liquids in that state. So as these spun out and they collided and exploded, then some would, spin this way. The sphere, when it was sent spinning, wasn't just sent spinning in one direction. It was sent spinning in an oblong direction in such a way in zero gravity that it would spin off particulates generally in this plane, but then as it would rotate around in space, it would start to spin it off in this plane, and then in this plane, and in this plane. And thus the visible universe in which we exist was created. I know that there are those that, and I'm a strict adherent to God's Word, that think that couldn't have been the methodology, but it's the way God showed me the detail of how the universe, the visible universe in which we exist, originated. And I pass that knowledge now on to you, and science will prove it to be true sooner or later. The universe in which we exist is comprised of 4 dimensions. And I will now end this video and talk about the 4th dimension in my next video, because I wanted to strictly talk about the origin of our visible universe and what is the true explanation for the universe in which we exist. And let's lay aside the theories for the facts. The facts are that we have a eternal creator that created the universe in the manner that I've just described, and science will prove it sooner or later.